Hi everyone. So I wanted to make a quick video based on what someone had requested, which is food sensitivities in withdrawal. And so when we talk about food sensitivities, we're not talking about things that in the regular medical world, when people say food intolerances, like necessarily gluten intolerance or dairy intolerance or true food allergies or something like celiac disease, we're not talking about that. What people are referring to is it seems to be when they eat certain foods, their symptoms of withdrawal are increasing, whatever that looks like for them. So it's similar to post-exertional malaise, which is when someone is pushing themselves physically, exercising, and they're noticing an increase in symptoms. It's the same thing. It's people are linking their flare-ups to whatever they did. And this is a natural thing. So when you have an increase in symptoms, you naturally try to link it to something. So you're searching for, what did I just do? What did I just eat? Could it be linked to that? And you're trying to make these connections, which is what we naturally do as humans. But as we know and learn in withdrawal, there aren't always these clear-cut connections. And so I say, look for patterns, because again, if I have a symptom flare up after I ate chocolate, then I will automatically think that chocolate caused the flare when this might not be the case. So look for consistencies. So for myself, I noticed that I could not really tolerate exercise. And this happened way before I even knew I was in withdrawal. It took me 8 months to even figure out I was in withdrawal. I became very symptomatic after stopping my 7 years of antidepressant use, but I didn't actually link it to stopping the antidepressant because I didn't know you could get withdrawal. I had no idea what that was. But I was noticing these things. Like I was having all these symptoms, and prior to withdrawal happening, the way I coped with so many things in life was through exercise. So when I started to become symptomatic after quitting antidepressants, I just was like, oh, I'll just exercise. If I had a headache or fatigue or anxiety, or like I had this whole cluster of symptoms in my first withdrawal. And I would notice after I would exercise that I would feel extremely ill afterwards, and I didn't understand it. So at that time, it would be incredible. Like I would be extremely nauseous. My face would actually swell. I would feel extremely debilitatingly fatigued to the point where I felt drugged almost. And I didn't understand why this was happening. And then in my second withdrawal, after I reinstated, took a bunch more drugs, ended up in benzo withdrawal, when I would try to exercise then, and I knew a lot more about withdrawal, although not nearly as much as now, when I would try to exercise, my neurological symptoms would shoot through the roof, and it would scare me but it happened every single time. And I was like, oh, it was very, very frustrating. So for a very long time, all I did was walk or do light swimming. That's what I did for exercise to help with my blood sugars because I have diabetes. And it wasn't until fairly long into my withdrawal that I was finally able to tolerate full strength, like full force exercising again. But again, it was a very consistent pattern. And so the thing about food sensitivities in withdrawal is everybody's list is different, and there is histamine. People talk about histamine problems, histamine intolerance in withdrawal, because of benzos being mast cell stabilizers. You come off and you have an increase in histamine. But as the histamine deception guy talks about in his videos, everybody seems to have a different list. And so why is that? The body, or the way that I see it, is that the mind, like the brain and nervous system, are overreacting and looking at all kinds of things as threats. So this can be chemicals, foods. There's a whole list of things that are potential. And once it's flagged as such, then you will start to have symptom increases after you ingest certain things. This isn't really a true like allergy or intolerance in that sense of the word. From my understanding, it's more of the brain perceiving threat. And so the way forward with that is just like anything else. So with me in exercise, it was like, okay, for now, the symptoms are increasing to a point that I can't really stand it. And so I'm going to go back to my walking and swimming for now. In my interview with Michelle that I recently did, she talked about this and how she eventually just made a decision to start eating the foods that she wanted to eat and just tolerating and pushing through the symptoms. And I think you have to gauge how intense the symptoms are. So for me, exercise, it was unbearable afterwards. And people too have certain life styles that they have to maintain. There are people with young children in withdrawal that have to maintain jobs. And so you also have to look at that as a factor in when and how much you push through symptoms when you do something. But in my opinion, and sort of what I've seen most effective for all of these things, is slow incremental exposures over time, essentially, to the things that are currently triggering you. But again, look for patterns, because your brain is doing this linking thing that isn't always consistent or like true, if that makes sense. But if it is a pattern, then it's slow incremental exposures into those things again, chemicals, foods, exercise, which it naturally happens over time that you build resilience. But I do think that these exposures, if you want to call them, are important, because your brain is in such a fearful state that it has to be shown safety through these things again. And again, I'm not talking about like true food allergies, things like celiac disease. This is just things that you've linked for yourself that seem to be flaring your symptoms repeatedly. And so again, and I've worked with a lot of people who have a wide range of food intolerances in withdrawal, but over time, again, you're slowly increasing your exposures to these foods. Or some people will just be like, you know what, I'm like Michelle, I'm just going to eat whatever I want and push through the flare-ups. Just again, gauging how intense the flare-ups are and whether or not you can tolerate that, depending on, again, the lifestyle that you need to maintain. So this is my thing. And even with things like caffeine, which caffeine is a known stimulant. So even people who aren't in withdrawal, sometimes they're like, I just don't like the way caffeine makes me feel. I just get too anxious. I don't feel well. And so some people will avoid it altogether. Some people will do an alternative, like maybe half caffeinated, half decaf. And some people are like, oh, I just love coffee so much, I'm going to push through the anxiety. It depends on a lot of different factors, but you absolutely, like exercise intolerance, like all chemicals, you absolutely can overcome these things. It's just part of the threat perception of withdrawal, and it can absolutely be overcome. So, and I this is speaking from someone who has celiac disease. I have a confirmed diagnosis. I was diagnosed in 2012. Every single day. So it wasn't random. Every single day I was having debilitating stomach aches, and to the point where, I mean, it was affecting me socially, my ability to really function. And so they did the scope, they did the biopsy, they realized that this is what was going on. I went gluten-free and everything reversed. And so that is very different than what I'm talking about in withdrawal food sensitivities. So let me know your thoughts on this. Have you noticed consistent patterns with yourself? Or do you think that you are just trying to make that link because you're trying to make sense of your experience and then you're cutting out those foods? Or like, have you started to overcome? I actually just recently was talking to a client, so if you're watching this, hello, who had, I can't remember if it was a diagnosed histamine intolerance or a self-diagnosed histamine problem from withdrawal, but she started just kind of like, based on my interview with Michelle, or because of that interview, just started to push through and try to tolerate those things again. And she's been doing really well. So again, different things for different people. And looking for those patterns. So let me know your thoughts on this, and if you've experienced this in withdrawal or any other type of sensitivity, intolerance. PEM is a big one, post-exertional malaise, and how you're overcoming that or have overcome that. So I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.